Hello, you delicious people, and welcome to another intimate episode of Intimate Conversations with the amazing Tracy Crossley, who you can find at her actual website, tracycrossley.com. Those will be in the show notes. Let me tell you a bit about her before we get away to the races. She is a behavioral relationship expert. She's an author. She's a podcast host. I get to be on hers. We're going to do another recording tomorrow. She specializes in treating individuals with unhealthy life and relationship patterns. And she helps clients transform like imposter syndrome, insecure attachment, negative belief systems, and breaking the cycle of narcissistic damage, destructive self-talk, and so much more. And she's got a background in psychology and innate emotional intuition, which draws from her own personal experience, which we will learn more about here. And she shows her clients how to permanently, change the repetition of these unhealthy, unhappy, unfulfilled life cycles, personally and professionally. And she's a popular weekly mental health podcaster of Freedom from Attachment, Living Fulfilled, Happy, and in Love. And this offers listeners a different perspective when it comes to breaking the cycle of unhealthy behaviors that keep them stuck in these repeating pain-inducing actions when they just stay on autopilot. And this podcast of hers addresses folks who want to deal with their emotional baggage, get unstuck, get happy, and have a very clear mindset. And she also has a monthly podcast called Moving On, busy gal, where she invites guests to speak about their life experiences in overcoming difficult times to be successful and happy in their lives. And I also just learned she has a studio in her house and a husband who edits. Okay, she's created like the epic life, has she not? So welcome to Intimate Conversations. It's nice to meet you.
It's great to meet you too. I'm really looking forward to what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, me too. There's a lot of different directions we could go. I always like to start with your journey that got you to where you are. Personally, for me, I teach about intimacy because it's what I need to learn. I teach what I need to learn. So tell us a bit about your life experience that got you here.
Well, my life experience that got me here, basically growing up, I had issues that I never knew why, because the feeling was I always had anxiety. I could fit in, but I never felt like I fit in, sort of a thing, and I also had a lot of trouble with intimacy in terms of emotional intimacy. Emotional intimacy to me was kind of a foreign thing, but at the time you don't really know that, right? Yeah. You're just kind of trying to think, okay, this is just the way I am. And this is how I don't fit. And then we fast forward through teenage years. Teenage years were just me feeling like the ugliest person on the face of the planet, no self-esteem. Although again, you wouldn't know it because I covered everything with humor and I was smart, you know what I mean? So I played those things up. I tried to be the big people pleaser, let me please everybody. Yeah. And then in my senior year of high school, I had my first boyfriend, and I'm only sharing this because had I seen my patterns back then, it would have been I would have had a completely different perspective on myself because I got into a relationship with someone where I worked my ass off. Like we at first came together and then he did something really weird. And I was, like 17, 18 years old. I'm like, oh my God, that's so weird. I must be me. I'm the one who's screwed up. Right. Right. And I didn't, so for like the next few relationships, it kind of set the stage that I was somehow this screwed up person who's going to want me. And I didn't realize like my whole self-worth was just like out the window and had been pretty much my whole life. So, I ended up getting married a few years after that. I got married in my early 20s, had 3 kids, got divorced by the time I was 30. Went into relationships almost like I was 18 again and used sex as a big tool. Like, oh, I can hook him because I'm good in bed kind of a thing. Right. That was like my whole mantra. Okay. And I basically spent about 20 years being single, having relationships, just everything you can name. And how I got here. So that was like my quick background. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So then what ended up happening was, God, how many years ago? Probably about 15 years ago, I read this book. I'm an avid bookaholic. Okay. Yeah. And I read this book. It was called The Wishing Year. Have you ever heard of The Wishing Year before?
No.
Okay. So The Wishing Year was written by a woman who was in her early 50s. And she basically spent a year wishing for things. She's in Northern California. She's a professor. And she didn't really believe like, oh, wishing, it seems so like law of attraction and woo woo and not her thing at all. Yeah. And so her whole year was everything she wished for was just like happened. And it's a true story. Right. Yeah. So it was interesting because I'm one of those people, I read a book and then if they're mentioning other books and other things, I'm scribbling them down and they mention this other book. And so I got this book and I found the author lived here in LA because I'm in Los Angeles. And I looked up the author and I'm like, I need to see you because I was in a dysfunctional relationship and I had all this anxiety and I was just a nutbag. I was a total nutbag. And so I went to her and she really couldn't help me, but I met her business partner and her business partner was like, oh, you know what? I can help you, and in terms of, I forgot to mention, I was out of work at the time and they're like, oh no, you can do our marketing and sales. And so I don't know if you know who Catherine Woodward Thomas is. And
totally. Yeah. She's been a guest and a friend for many years. So
well, that's who I went to.
Wow.
Book. And Claire, who was her partner at the time.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah. So I ended up doing like sales and marketing for them for a bit. And one day Claire calls me and she's like, we want you to be a coach. I'm like, I don't want to be a coach. I'm like, I have, first of all, ADD. So the thought of sitting through like 4 days of training is just not on my list of things to do. Right. Yeah. And also I'm like, how the hell am I going to make money as a coach? That's just not going to happen. And I was in this attached relationship where I had all this anxiety. Right. And so my thinking was so skewed. I was like, oh my God, if I'm in a place and he wants to go out or do something, I'm just being super honest. Like, this is how jacked up I was.
Yeah.
I can't go out with him because I'm going to be tied up for 4 days and I don't want to be tied up. I always wanted to like have my time be free just in case he'd want to get together.
Yeah. I get it. It's not jacked up at all. It's very common.
Yeah. So anyways, so long story short, I ended up going through the coaching training when Claire's husband called me and says, you do realize you're going to get this training for free. And it's like a $4,000 training. I'm like, oh, okay. And they thought I would be a good coach,
Amazing.
Yeah. So I ended up doing it. And then I ended up losing everything after that. Like because I had been unemployed, in 2008, it was just like everything hit the fan.
Great year. Yeah.
Great year. And that was the year where I ended up losing where I was living. Like I lost everything. I had the dysfunctional relationship. I ended up staying on someone's couch. Like it was just like one thing after another. And so for me, but what was funny is my whole life is falling apart. And when you're becoming a coach, you have to do a practicum. And I think that's pretty universal, right? Where you're coaching people for free. I kept coaching people for free because I was just a nut. Right. So like I'm losing everything, but let me keep coaching you on improving your love life while I have one that's like an inferno. It's burning in the background. Right.
It's perfect training. It's totally perfect training.
Oh my God. So that was like 14 years ago. And, since then I've learned a lot as far as insecure attachment. I didn't stay a love coach. I kept evolving because, like you said at the beginning, intimacy was what you felt like you had to learn.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I had to learn how to actually be emotionally available. I had to learn how not to operate just off of the physical. I had to learn, like how to get rid of my anxiety and how to actually, be open and available. So that was the thing. And and now I'm married for the second time and I got my act together. So I don't know. I was going to say, can I cuss or no? Is that enough?
Oh yeah. Lots of cussing. it's fine. Yeah.
Okay, good. Cause there was a lot of, okay, good. Cause I was like, there's a lot of times I wanted to say shit and other things. I'm like, oh wait, I forgot to ask. So thank you.
I'm glad we're taught. Yeah. No, my mother's mantra, she was an English teacher. Everything had to be like perfect English, except for when she said shit, fuck, goddamn, bugger, damn. That was her little mantra. So that's reference from time to time to honor my sweet mom. So yeah, everything goes here. Wow. And how amazing. I was in LA for 20 years.
Oh,
you're familiar. And I'm like, oh, maybe just like the coaching crowd or what have you. But now that you're, Catherine and the whole thing, it makes a lot of sense. We've probably been at a party together or some networking event at some point.
Probably.
Amazing. So how and when did your second husband arise? What did you do differently? How did you know? How's it going? He's a great editor. We've got that one covered so far. But
totally. He loves what I do. In fact, he just said like an hour ago, he's like, I love what you do. And he actually started crying Like my husband's very emotional, and he was like, yeah, he was very moved. And I'm like, oh, you're so sweet. He is. He's a lot nicer than me.
Wow, we love him. Okay, so how did
Yes.
that unfold?
Okay, so basically in 2016, I was doing a retreat in Ojai.
Yeah.
And I remember standing in the bathroom before I was going up there.
Yeah.
And I went, I really want to have a relationship. And I felt this heavy, like doom feeling. Like, when you say you want to do something and it feels like the impossible, it feels just like, oh my God, can I even do it? Well, that was the feeling I had, right? Wow. And here I am, I'm going to go help people so they can have healthy relationships. And here I am, like, still struggling with the concept. Yeah. But I realized at that moment how I thought I had committed in the past, like, oh, I want a healthy relationship, but then I would do everything not to create it. And so I made a promise to myself. I made a commitment at that time. I said, okay, I'm going to do whatever it takes. I don't care how I get there. I'm going to get into a healthy, committed relationship because I want to experience that. And so it was just so funny because I literally had all these different dating experiences that started to happen. I stopped ghosting people because I was a good ghoster. I stopped trying so hard to be a good date, and I was more myself. And one of the things I did was I decided I wanted to be curious when I went out with somebody about how I was acting. And a lot of times we're not checked into ourselves, right? We're so busy trying to convince the other person how wonderful we are, right? And I just went, okay, Tracy, pay attention. And I would hear myself saying shit where I'm like, God, you're trying to get a second date. You don't even like this guy, and you're trying to get another date with him, right? That's all I cared about. It's like, just like me. I don't have to like you, but like me.
Yeah. I have no idea what you're talking about. Wow.
Yeah. So I really put myself front and center. And then this one guy, I think it was like a couple months later, I dated this one guy, and he was like my type in terms of the whole attachment issue where, he was going to end up being a little avoidant because guess what? He didn't live here. He was just here for a short period of time. We had chemistry. Perfect. We went out and, he's like, oh yeah, we have that chemistry. And I'm just like, oh shit, fuck me. And so that was going on in my head. Right. And, like we went on a couple dates and I was like, keeping okay, Tracy, you can't with this dude. So I thought, I hadn't heard from him in a week. I'm like, okay, oh good. He's gone. And then he called and I'm like, okay, I made this promise to myself. I can't just ignore him. I can't just blow it off. So I'm like, I have to call him back. And I told my friend, and she's like, well, let's meet for margaritas after, which was a great idea, by the way, because that made it like, I have a goal, which is to get through the conversation so I can go have margaritas. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so I literally had to tell this dude who I had chemistry with, I'm like, yeah, we can't do this because you're not here permanently. And okay, I told him everything, right? This dude was like, oh, well, I can be your sex slave. You never know. I might be your soulmate. Like he literally had a list of, arguing back. Yeah. Just like, he didn't want to let it go. I was on the phone with him like a half hour. I'm like, I cannot even believe this because I don't like confrontation either. Yeah. So, which, I've learned to adjust to. Yeah. But I had experiences like that where I had to just like be so upfront. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the last thing I did was, so now you're talking, this is from April to like June, July, and now we're in, let's just skip to December. In December, I decided I'm going to write a letter to a dude I haven't met before. Okay. Yes. So December 14th, which is my mom's birthday. I didn't even like put 2 and 2 together. And I started writing down, like, hey, I'm Tracy, blah, blah, blah. But I was super honest. And so like, if I was in a bad mood or I felt like, oh my God, you're never coming, I'd put that stuff in the letter. Like I didn't do the whole like fake positive bullshit that people do when they're trying to manifest something. I'm like, no, I'm going to be really me. So I was writing this stuff. And what was interesting is I had always hated dating. But since I became curious and since I started to speak up, I actually enjoyed dating because I felt like I would always learn something about myself or another person, right? Like, oh, you know a lot about wine. And then I'd come home and I go, okay, I'm not disappointed because I learned something, right?
Yeah.
So I, on my dad's birthday, which was February 25th, so like 2 months later, I get a message from my now husband and I was on Match.com, by the way, and I was on Tinder also, but and it, I had people Google me and they found out what I do, and they'd be like, maybe you can help me. And I'm like, no, I'm here to date. I'm not here to help you. I'm here to date. But anyway, yeah, I got a message from him and I thought, oh, this is interesting. So, I went out with him, and it was funny because all these other guys kind of fell away, for one reason or another. And I learned how to deal with rejection, because a couple of them were like, I don't see this going anywhere. And instead of me personalizing it and being like, oh my God, I basically processed it and moved on. But what was funny is, like 3 months after dating my husband, I looked at the letters and I'm like, oh, and I showed them to him. And I'm like, oh my God, I wanted a guy who lives around the corner. You live around the freaking corner, like literally a mile from me,
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was all sorts of things, you play the guitar. Yep. He has 6 albums, it's like all of these different things that, but the top of the list was kindness. I wanted somebody who was kind. My husband is like, the kindest person I've ever known in my entire life. Like nobody can just like, really? You're that kind. Like all the time. He still surprises me.
Wow. Oh, how beautiful. How friggin' beautiful. This is amazing, because the way there's so many things I want to talk about. So I don't forget, I'm going to go through you committed, like for realsies. I'm now having a healthy, committed relationship. And you were brave enough to recognize your sabotaging patterns or your ghosting patterns or your fakey fake, whatever. So like, okay, that's amazing. You started to get curious about yourself as opposed to being the focus over there. Like, am I good enough? Do you like me? Can we have a second date even though I don't even like you? Like, who am I being? Which takes such awareness, but also such non-judgment. Like to truly be compassionately curious with yourself and go, look what I'm doing, and then learn from it, grow from it. So that's friggin' amazing. Enjoying the process. And then writing a letter authentically, like writing a letter, showing all your wobbly parts and your insecure parts and your humanity. And not like a wishing list, even though the book started off with the wishing year, but really like he's really alive. Like he's like, it's actually like talking like that quantum say, what is it? When you're quantum entangled, like you just connect. And you're gonna have a conversation. At what point after these dates were you like, was it about 3 months, like you just said, when you're like, oh my God, I think it's him?
I think it was sooner, I want to say, because one of the things I noticed, I had, and I'm not going to lie about this at all, because I think that we often get tied into thinking things have to be like a fantasy, like we've acted in a way that's perfect. And I wasn't perfect in terms of, I had anxiety when I started dating him. And I realized I had a lot of fears, and I had to have several moments with myself where I'm like, do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Do not, like stick with this, because I noticed I was smiling all the time. And there was no reason for me to go, you know what, I don't want to date you anymore. It was about me. And that was another realization when I started to date him, that I was like, wow, I'm still fucked up. Okay. And I had to work through those things. And as I worked through those things, then I was more able to go, okay, he's pretty much what I asked for. And why wouldn't it be him? Like, I think it was like 3 days after I went on the first date with him, I'm like, I might have met you, because I'm writing this letter, right? I might have met you, but I'm not sure if it's you, but I think it's you. That was the kind of letter that I wrote. But then, it just took me a while, because I realized, wow, I have a lot of fear of getting close to somebody.
Yeah. And as these fears came up, the old you would have blamed the other, or the old you would have just ghosted and ran? What would the old you have done? Both. Yeah. Either.
Totally.
Either. And this time you just told him the truth, like you did in the letter. I'm really scared right now. I feel like running. I feel like blaming you, but I'm not. I'm going to go sit in my own shit. I'm going to process it. I'll see you for dinner later, or something like that. Like,
pretty much. Well, I did tell him. And what was interesting, so the first week that we went out, I went out with him 3 times in the first week. And on the third date, where I was supposed to come over for dinner, and his son lived with him at the time, and I was like, I went on a hike and I came back, and I had gone with a girlfriend, and I was just like, oh my God, I had like, I was super uptight, and I was like going through my stories, and he called me and he's like, hey, I just wanted to like, check in with you and see how you are about, coming over later. I get that you're pretty cautious. Like, he could totally read me. Right. And he goes, so I just wanted to share that and let you know that we can be friends right now, and just see how things go. But I'm not going to do anything that's going to rock the boat. I'm not expecting anything. I just really like you and I'd like to spend time with you. Right. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
It's so funny when you just said those words. It sounds like how you were actually talking to yourself. I'm okay. Let's just be curious. Let's, he had clarity that he really liked you. Like you had clarity. No, I'm having this relationship. But wow, it's really amazing to me when the outer starts reflecting the inner.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. A lot too. Like that's pretty consistent in our relationship. He has had a health issue this year or last year, 2021. He ended up having to have open heart surgery.
Holy, that is intense. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of like an intense 2 years as far as like, the COVID stuff. And then we had family members that died and not from COVID, but other things. And it was just like all this craziness. Right. And then that was like the icing on the cake, this last summer and this last winter. And so I've learned a lot about myself. It hasn't changed the relationship as far as that connection, but it's changed the relationship in other ways. But, that's also hopefully temporary on some level too, but it's like we still get along the same.
Beautiful. How has the fear of losing him been a gift?
I mean, it is a gift and in the same sense, it's not like it would have been before, like how we get when we think we might lose something, we try to hold on really super tight, but it was just more of an appreciation and a gratitude for whatever time we have.
Oh, lovely. Wow. Yeah. And do you see that as a direct result of having integrated so many of your fears before, so you could be more present to gratitude and appreciation?
Oh, totally. And all along, I'm always doing work. I'm always going to be a work in progress.
Yes. Thanks. I just broke up over Thanksgiving. So,
wow.
Yeah. So I'm right. Still could cry at any minute, going through it all. And it's just really, it's really beautiful for me to hear how you don't give up, how you keep doing the work, and how you're a relationship coach like me. And it's just, it's beautiful to be real and vulnerable and be that safe place for clients to know, hey, we don't have to have it all figured out. And we're going to keep putting one foot in front of the other.
I think so. When I was in training, I don't know who said it, but they said, as long as you're 1 step or 1,000 steps ahead of somebody, and it doesn't mean ahead like you're leveled up and you're better than them, but in the knowledge that they're seeking, you can help them,
Totally.
And I always just kind of leave it to the universe that whoever's interested is going to show up.
Yeah. Same. If you're looking for a marriage expert of 30 years, that would not be me. But intimacy, about being real and vulnerable and brave and transparent and sitting in your fires and keeping your heart open. I got that one.
And I'm looking forward to talking about that tomorrow, by the way.
Oh, it's very good. Okay, good. Yeah. How has it transformed this? Do you like me? And does that occur anymore in your marriage? Like, do you find yourself getting hooked ever? Or is it really, because you were saying like permanently change. And I'm just like, okay, how do we permanently change that one?
It's interesting because I look back, because we've been together almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years next month. And nice. I look, it's like crazy. I'm like, God, this time has flown. But anyway, I look at how I see me and I see me so differently, because I don't have, if I look back, like what I was talking about when I had anxiety in the beginning, I don't have those kind of feelings anymore. I don't have those kind of fears anymore. And it's because I learned how to deal with myself, even more so. Like I thought I knew before he came along, I'd been helping people at that point for 8 years at that point. And so you think, oh, okay, I've got it going on. Yeah. But what I had to do is I really had to learn how to change my beliefs. And I was committed to that. That was my commitment, because my thing was I didn't like feeling shitty. And I felt like I always felt shitty.
Yeah.
And, and so I didn't want that as my well-being when I don't have well-being. So
Yeah.
it really was about how I went ahead and I break patterns. And so with him, like we keep our communication really open and clear. Like we don't dump shit on each other. Like I don't blame him. He doesn't blame me. And if we ever have an argument of any sort, it's never long lasting. And each of us kind of goes to our corner and it's like, okay, where in my life is this coming from? Because he's just triggering something.
Totally. Yeah.
And vice versa.
And you both own it. Come back, clean it up, grow together. That's, was that in your letter too? That he does
it was because I wanted somebody who was, had some self-awareness and was working on himself, and would be open. And it was just, he had come, actually, when I met him, he had only been 6 months out of a 10-year relationship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But their relationship had been falling apart for a couple of years. It wasn't like, that, but he had decided to learn and grow himself. And so he had always kept that up. And so it was funny because I didn't give my last name, I guess, when I started seeing him, like the first date, but then he Googled me and then he's like, oh my God, he sends me a text. You get it. You totally understand this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay. Well, let's see what happens here,
Oh, so good. So good.
Yeah.
Tell me your beliefs on beliefs. For me, I'm sure like you've probably done tons of courses, tons of trainings, all these different things. I really like going to the root core, unintegrated energy, emotion, trauma that triggers things. And it just seems like to be the most lasting way, that there's the wisdom that came from the integration of that trauma, and it's in there. And I have, I don't know, like 10 more affirmations, and I just keep need to put sprinkles on top of the ice cream cone of shit and just keep thinking positive, and I don't believe it. So this idea of like changing beliefs, I have been trained in a way that I believe really does change the beliefs, but it integrates in the other elements, the images, the thoughts, the emotions, the body sensations, as well as the beliefs. I'm really curious about changing the belief that you changed in yourself, and to the degree we can talk about how you did that in a lasting way. Because if that's unconscious running the show, that's going to be a shit show. And then we become conscious and we try to say, I am good enough. And then you don't feel it.
That's such bullshit, by the way.
Totally bullshit, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about this changing beliefs. How does it work for you, Tracy?
Well, you kind of like named everything I do. So,
okay, so same thing. Like it.
Yeah. I'm like, this is how I see it. I see it, you're a little kid, you're a little sponge, right? You're just checking out the world, trying to figure out your place in it. You're trying to figure out what the world is. You're receiving all this information, whether it's positive, negative, or whatever, right? You're developing a perception. And so anything that became a belief, I believe you had to have an emotional reaction to, because if I just say something to you, it doesn't just become a belief. It's something that you have an emotional response to more than once, right?
Yeah.
And then it becomes a story that you have about yourself. It becomes a story about the world, but its deep roots are emotional in nature in your subconscious. Yeah. And so that's where I go to. And that's what I try to teach people. I teach people to get in their body instead of being a body carrying around a head, right?
Yep.
And and the thing is, I make people take action. You have to align everything, right? You have to align what your thought, your intention, your feeling, what's a real feeling versus a reaction. Because a lot of people think crying and being angry are real feelings. And it's like, no, they're reactions. I mean, you ever notice like you're crying, you just kind of stay in a loop. You're like, cry, cry, cry. You don't get deeper. You're just crying.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm always like, okay, you got to figure out what your real emotions are. You got to figure out what this is a story, and fuck the story, because the story isn't going to, if you change it, okay, you can do that temporarily, but you're going to still have this deeper belief at that level. So, I have a variety of tools because I had to do it on myself. I knew, that I just didn't want to feel how I did. And so when I started doing these things, I noticed I don't feel that way anymore. Like I used to have, my big one was I'm alone. That was my big ass belief. Got it. Next to the next one was I'm wrong. I'm wrong about everything.
Alone and wrong. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And so everything I would do was geared towards not doing that. Right. I got to be a people pleaser. I got to be perfect. I got to be, all this bullshit.
Yeah.
And so what I learned was anytime I was willing to go into my body and let myself feel my feelings, right?
Yes,
And ride like the wild pony, as some of it feels like you are.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I also learned that, when you have a subconscious image, because your subconscious is hooked up to the parts of your body, your emotions aren't in your head, they're in your body.
Yeah.
So, it was always, okay, where did this start? When's the first time I felt this way? One of those kind of leading questions right into it.
Yeah.
Right. And you're feeling it and something comes up, and I go through different releases. Like I have a bunch of different ways I do it. But one of the things that ends up happening, in that is I try to bring people forward and, bring myself forward. What action can I take right now while I'm feeling this feeling that is going to make me vulnerable? That's going to make a change. That would be something I don't do. And it's not that I'm like nailing all of this at once. It's more like intentional rather than a bunch of words like, okay, Tracy, you got to do, I don't do that. I don't do the whole self-talk thing because that actually psychologically is not good for you. So please don't do that. It's more about, what are you doing to take action with the feeling so that you can break the pattern that holds that belief in place? Because I have this thing where I go, you have a belief right here, got a rule on top of it, got a story on top of it, patterns, evidence, right?
Yeah.
So if you can change the evidence by changing the rule, the story, or the pattern, okay, and usually you've got to do all three. And then what happens is there's less evidence that supports that crappy belief.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, there's like so many different ways I go about doing this, but it's all at the level of emotion.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, like people come work with me and it takes them a long time to get in their bodies, a long time to even understand that that's the safest place you can be.
Oh, say more about that. I totally concur. Yes.
Yeah. So, most people, they are driven by their circumstances, right? Like a lot of us that had dysfunction, we're like always like a little, what do you call it? Like a radar. Like we're always
like hyper vigilant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And for me, while being disassociated. So, because I had to be numb because I didn't want anything to get in there. So, so anyway, so everything was always about the outside. And that's what I was talking about, like with the dating. It was always what's happening out here. How do I make myself into a chameleon to go along with the circumstances out here? And I got to a point in my life where, the circumstances would be so daunting and I'd feel so shitty. And I'd be like, why am I doing this to myself? Right. Yeah. Like even like things like going out to dinner with a group of friends, I'd be like, oh my God, I don't even want to do that. So one of the things that I started noticing as I did this work and I started breaking down these patterns that, would hold these beliefs in place, I could withstand certain circumstances that I couldn't before because I knew that wherever I went, there I was. And the safest place for me to be was in my body. Like there was nothing expected of me. I'm not having a heart attack. I'm not having a brain tumor. I'm not having any of this shit. Nothing's happening in here. Everything's okay. So if everything's okay in here and that's the only place I control, cool, I'm in here. Rather than I'm out here where nothing is under my control. Right.
Correct. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I agree so wholeheartedly. And I'm so glad that all of your processes, even though they're around beliefs, are actually based in the body and in the emotion. Because to me, that's where the lasting change happens, the true integration happens. And it takes, as you said, a pony ride or whatever it was, like it can be really scary. And to have somebody like you hold space or me hold space when they're going through that, and it doesn't last for very long. You can swim forever. Right. But the actual intensity of it, maybe, I don't know about you, 5 or 10 seconds, and then it starts to wane. And this is curious that in that deep emotional place, once it's sort of like the worst has happened, that's when you tell them an action, ask them to create a new action. Like, where does the action?
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
And that'll be out of my own life. And just because it's easier for me to pull out it, because this is so esoteric, right? It's so esoteric because you're trying to describe feelings. So this is one of those moments. So I don't know. It was like 3-4 months after I started dating my husband. His daughter wanted to go to lunch with him. And I'm like, cool. And we both taken the day off work to be together. And he's like, I'm just going to go to lunch and then I'll come over. So I'm like, okay, fine. And so he goes to lunch, and I'm like, why am I uptight? Why am I irritated? What is going on? This is already starting to happen, right? I'm like, okay. So he tells me he's going to be longer because she wants him to go with her to the doctor because she was trying to get diagnosed for something at the time. So here I am, and I'm triggered into a space, and I'm not sure what the hell's going on with me. I just know I'm completely out of line. Like, I know I haven't said or done anything out of line yet, but I know inside of myself that I'm like fucked up. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start some shit. I'm going to start some drama. And I know that is what is wanting to come out. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was because I used to have a thing about people being late. And I also felt like my time wasn't being valued, even though in this situation, intellectually, I'm like totally fine, totally cool. Are you kidding?
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
So I just sound like a jerk, but I'm just being honest. And so,
it's all beautiful. Yeah.
And so then before he came over, I'm like, I'm just going to warn you that I'm having a triggered moment. So he comes over. And he had picked flowers in the yard to give to me from his yard. And I was like, oh, that's really sweet. I'm like, and I'm holding back all this crazy. The crazy is in here and the crazy wants to come out. Okay. And I'm like, okay. And I said, okay, I am going to be crazy. I said, I just want you to know that I am triggered and this is not your fault. And I'm just telling you ahead of time. So I start to tell him what's happening and he gets triggered. Because, he's had his own drama with relationships. Right.
Yeah.
And so both of us are used to, well, I should go home or you should leave. That's like our old mantras. Right.
Yeah.
So instead, I'm feeling all these different emotions. Right. And I just want to come unglued, and I'm not coming unglued, but I'm definitely sharing things that were really hard and really scary and really vulnerable to share.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, there's that fight in me that just wants to say, fuck it. I'm not having this conversation at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we both sit at the table. And this is all like probably 5 minutes at this point. Okay. Just to give you guys a timeline here.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there and I'm feeling into it, and I'm feeling, and I can feel it all the way down my body into my gut. Right.
Yeah.
And what I'm feeling on the way down is the part that wants to bolt.
Yeah.
But I'm knowing intuitively, because that's your inner wisdom. Your inner wisdom isn't fucking with you. It's telling you the truth. Yeah. And it was like, no, you're going to sit here and you're going to talk. You're not going into your igloo. That was basically the gist. It wasn't like a conversation. It's an intention. It's a knowing. Because to me, when the inner knowing's talking to you, it's not like it's got dialogue, it's just, So I had to say things that were even more vulnerable and not want him to leave, but not try to hold on to have him stay.
Wow, this is intense, honey. This is beautiful.
It was, but I was taking that action while I was feeling all this shit.
Yeah.
Instead of closing down, instead of doing what I normally do. And it shifted. I never, ever, ever had that happen again, ever.
Wow.
And it's been 5 years. It's because, you take that action in that moment and you break that pattern, you take that reaction away. It's no longer going to work because now I'm connected to my inner wisdom, right? The real me, the authentic me, who's like, yeah, you know what? I kind of like fucked this all up. Okay. I'm going to take responsibility, which was hard for me to say at the time, and to be kind and compassionate and vulnerable was super difficult, but I did it. And that's what you have to do. Like, you want to feel that shit and you're in the middle of feeling it. Look at what can I do right now? What can I do right now that's going to be me being in alignment with me and taking care of me? And not listening to this inner critic or the way I usually do things. And I'm going to go and do this and do it.
Wow. Yeah. I love this. Thank you for giving us that beautiful example. I bow. I high five.
Thank you.
All of it. It's beautiful. I'm so glad we're talking tomorrow because I want to just tell you all this stuff about what's going on with me, but I want to make sure I'm still like making it all about Tracy.
Absolutely.
I'll share this little baby response to what you just said. And then I want feedback if this is what you're referring to, so that I'm learning. And then I want everyone to be sure that she's all over social media. You can also go to Tracy Crossley, CROSSLEY.com, and learn more about this beautiful woman. And when I'm back in LA again, we're definitely having coffee or whatever we're doing, but I'm moving to India at the end of the month. So it's not going to be, not going to be for a while. Okay, so I'm not going to give you the whole preamble. You can stay tuned on her podcast to get the whole story. So basically, I had, when I lived in LA, a 12 or 13 year custody battle after a divorce. And I know my way in and out of court. And it was, they attacked and I would defend. And they were 3 steps ahead and saying all these sort of, like, it was not a fun experience whatsoever. So this last thing that occurred, what was going on inside was a lot of shame. I had a lot of shame about what was going on behind the scenes that I didn't know how to deal with, handle. As a relationship coach, how could you have such a fucked up life over here and all the rest of it? So I was just going to fix this. I was going to make this happen until it got so bad that he got arrested for assault and thrown in jail.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and he called the police, and if he didn't, I probably would have gone back for another round and another round and another round. So
he called the police on himself?
Yeah. He destroyed my phone. I started screaming hysterically and wouldn't stop, screaming for help. And he called them to say, she's crazy. And they're like, no, she's covered in blood. You're coming with us. So, so the old patterns of, okay, hunker down, court, this is going to be 12 years. They're going to try every snide thing that's going to, like, all the beliefs. And then of course the beliefs create the reality, right? And so it started to happen. And I think I've done what you are speaking of, like staying in alignment. What is a different action that I could take? Now, if I try to create an agreement with him outside of civil and criminal court, that's called extortion. I call it collaboration. I call it cooperation and collaboration of conscious people, but court calls that extortion. So I'm like, but I choose to go up. I choose to go from 3D to 5D. I choose to like have a different outcome. I choose to create a different world here. So I took an action and I asked these gentlemen on my behalf, without anything in writing, to suggest certain things that could make all of this go away. And we could all grow and evolve and go our separate ways. So I took a different action. And it's literally like today, Tracy, the day of this interview, that I spoke to these, I call them the three wise men, to create a different outcome and allow myself to protect myself, honor myself, but also honor the highest outcome for all, and go over and above what I normally would have done. I just would have like trotted through, another friggin' court battle, because that's just the old Allana who believes on some level she deserves that level of treatment from men. That happened in the relationship and happened in court. So,
wow.
Changing.
So, okay. So basically then you're not going to have to go back to court according to what these guys are telling you.
If these gentlemen can talk with my ex and create certain outcomes, then I will waive certain choices and peace for all.
That's cool. That's so cool if you can do it, because you're in alignment with yourself.
Yeah.
And that is what makes the difference. It's like when you're in alignment with yourself, I mean, that's really the result anyways. Like, yes, I want a result out here, the circumstances, but the result inside of you, it's that you have to live with you, right? It's like that well-being, that feeling of empowerment. And that seems like what you're talking about right now.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll go deeper tomorrow. But yeah, I love that we're giving the viewers and listeners, what does action mean? It's not 10 more sit-ups or whatever. We're not talking about like that. We're talking about something really deep, soulfully aligned, brave as fuck, vulnerable, that shifts a pattern at such a core level that you can't go back.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love it. You're cool.
So are you.
Oh, thank you, sister. Thank you. So, first, just tracycrossley.com. She's all over social media. I'm sure we'll have you back on a more regular basis. But in these closing moments, from your beautiful heart to the listeners and viewers, what do you want to leave them with?
I want to leave them with the thing that took me a long time to get, self-compassion. You can read about it, you can go, that sounds good, but to do it on a consistent basis, to have that sort of generosity for yourself, to give to yourself, to give yourself space that you are wherever you are in your, let's say, journey, and to be okay with that, because you don't need to add on that extra layer of struggle. The extra layer of struggle distracts you from developing that relationship with yourself. So just remember, to have that sense of generosity and compassion.
Oh, I love that. That's so my whatever mantra with this intimate relationship with ourselves. Yeah. If we can't give ourselves grace at moments where we've normally hit ourselves with a 2x4, we're not going to get anywhere. And
exactly.
And it's brave to be kind to yourself. When you fell down again, or it didn't go the way you wanted again, and to create a bonfire with s'mores with those 2x4s.
Well, it's always that shame, right? Shame is the shit that we're like, oh,
yeah,
dig me a hole. I need to crawl into it. And really, it's such a shitty form of judgment of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's going to be what I begin to integrate more and teach more about how long I stayed in this relationship, hiding in shame, that how could I have, don't let anyone know, and fix this. And rather than integrate my own shame, bless and release him and be free. So, yeah.
I think that's great. And you know what? It's so funny. I was reading something, and I'm sure you've read these same things about how being your authentic self is really like being a magnet. And, you do it like as a coach, and it sounds like you do it and I do it. And then I'm always looking, at least at this point in my life, for, am I hiding anything? Am I holding anything back? Because I realized the more vulnerable, even about things that I'm, felt shame about in the past, or if I feel shame about something, that I'm actually helping other people, because everybody does things in hiding.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm quite, I don't know, vulnerable and out there, because that way I don't have to remember who I lied to and who I told the truth to. It's like so much easier. Right? Just tell the truth.
Yes.
I'm taking, I've done one certification of my own coaches, and I'm going through a second one right now. And normally I show up and I teach a process, and I'm just like, I need to be processed myself. And so I've taken them through they've watched me go through some stuff. And it was terrifying to show them all the stuff inside, but that these processes really work, and the connection that vulnerability and intimacy creates in the community and with me. It's the opposite of what the fear says. Everyone's going to just think you're batshit crazy and leave. Actually, they're going to think you are badass and brave, and
exactly
them permission to do the same. So,
yeah, I love it.
Yay! Hang on 2 days in a row. Okay, everybody, we love this woman, Tracy Crossley. Get to know her, love her, follow her, do all the good stuff. And there's a million gems in this incredible interview. I know one probably tugged at you the most, moved you the most. My request is you take 5 minutes right now after this interview. You get out your journal, you go for a walk in nature, contemplate, reflect, and then take an action that you normally wouldn't have taken. That means, like that ship, you have one little degree and you end up in another country, your life will be different because of this conversation. So please love and honor yourself that much to take that one action, and know that our love is wind in your wings. And we will see you next time on Intimate Conversations.